Welcome back to the deep dive. So you gave us a really interesting stack of sources today,
Hmm.
all focused on the absolute fundamentals of security testing. We're talking about the kind of core material that underpins major certifications.
Right, exactly. And the mission here isn't just to, list facts. We're taking everything from network architecture to coding practices to industry standards like the OWASP 10.
And the goal is to distill it, to
Yeah,
turn it into something immediately useful, focusing on where, I guess, defense layers meet reality.
that's the idea.
So our approach today is framed around 10 critical questions. These really highlight the most foundational and, frankly, often the most vulnerable areas of security.
It's a good way to structure it.
We're going to weave this into a conversation about layered defense, starting from the outside and working our way in, because at the end of the day, security is a chain.
And we want to find the weakest link. So let's start right there.
Yeah.
We can spend millions on firewalls, on advanced detection systems, but our sources all confirm the same thing.
What's that?
The biggest vulnerability often walks around on two legs.
Okay, let's unpack this then. Starting with us, the human element. We see all these technical exploits, SQL injection, buffer overflows, you name it.
Mm-hmm.
But what's the primary attack type that targets our psychology, our behavior, rather than a flaw in the actual software?
That is, without a doubt, social engineering.
Right.
It's the attack type that bypasses almost every technical control you've put in place because it's not targeting code. It's targeting trust or urgency or just simple curiosity.
It's pure psychological manipulation.
Entirely. And it's so effective because, an attacker doesn't need a zero-day exploit if they can just call the help desk.
And pretend they're the CEO who's locked out.
Precisely. That's a classic example of what we call pretexting. The attacker creates a believable scenario, a pretext, to gain your trust and get you to give them sensitive data or access.
So if the user is the vulnerability, the goal has to be limiting the damage they can cause, even accidentally, which leads us to internal controls. Let's say a user does fall for a pretext, an attacker gets their credentials. What's the core security principle that stops them from, say, accessing the entire company's financial database?
That's where we rely on the principle of least privilege, or POL LP, as you'll hear it.
Whole OP. Okay.
And the principle is simple in theory. Any user or any system process should only be granted the absolute minimum access rights needed to do its job. Nothing more.
We hear that term constantly, but what does it look like in a modern environment? I mean, beyond just don't give everyone admin access.
It means constant diligence. For example, a web server process that needs to write to a log file should only have write permission to that specific log directory.
Not the whole hard drive.
Exactly. Or in a microservices world, it means service A is only allowed to call one specific necessary API endpoint on service B and nothing else.
That sounds like it could create a lot of friction operationally. Users always want more access for convenience.
Oh, it does. The trade-off is always security versus usability and agility. If you're too strict, you slow down legitimate work.
But if you're too relaxed.
The blast radius of any successful attack just explodes.
So how do you mitigate that?
A common strategy is implementing temporary, time-bound access. You might hear it called just-in-time access. Permissions are granted for a short window to do a task, and then they're automatically revoked.
A good balance. So we've contained a compromised user. But what about the data itself? Let's pivot from people to the technical controls for data integrity.
A critical piece of the puzzle.
Yeah.
It's the I in the CIA triad.
Exactly. So when we're sending data across a network, how do we verify that it hasn't been tampered with along the way? And crucially, without revealing the original data.
We use hashing.
Okay.
Hashing is a one-way cryptographic function. It takes any input, a file, a message, anything, and it converts it into a fixed-length string of characters. We call that the hash value.
Now, here's what's interesting. We also have encryption, right, for confidentiality. Why is hashing the go-to tool specifically for checking integrity?
Because of its unique properties. It's deterministic and it's one way. If you change even a single bit in the original data, the output hash changes completely. It's unrecognizable.
So the receiver just runs the same hash function on the data they got.
And compares it to the hash the sender provided. If they match, integrity is confirmed. Encryption, on the other hand, is designed to be reversible. Its main job is keeping secrets, not proving the data hasn't been altered.
Can you give us a quick real-world example of that?
Sure. Think about downloading a big software update. The vendor will often post an SHA-256 hash right next to the download link.
I see those all the time.
So you download the file, you run a local tool to calculate its hash, and you compare your result to the one on the website. If but they don't match, the file was corrupted, or worse, tampered with by an attacker.
And you just confirmed its integrity without needing any kind of decryption key?
That's it.
That makes it crystal clear. Okay, let's go back to the idea of layers and network architecture. When you're providing services to the public, you need a buffer zone. What is the role of the demilitarized zone, the DMZ?
The DMZ is a really vital architectural concept. It's essentially a segregated subnet, a little island that separates the untrusted public internet from your trusted, sensitive internal network.
So why not just put your public web server on the internal network, or even just outside the firewall completely?
Well, neither of those really provides defense in depth. If you put public servers in a DMZ, they're protected by one firewall from the internet.
Yeah.
But they're also isolated from your internal network by a second firewall.
Ah, so it's a two-firewall setup if your public web server in the DMZ gets compromised.
The attacker still has to break through that inner firewall to get to the crown jewels, your customer database, your employee records.
It's quarantine zone.
Exactly. It's all about preventing lateral movement. You contain the breach within that low-value buffer network.
Textbook layering. Okay, let's move up the stack to the application itself. We want to catch flaws early. What kind of tool analyzes an app's source code for vulnerabilities without ever running the program?
That would be static application security testing, or SAST.
SAST. And the key is that it's static.
Right. The analysis happens while the code is at rest. It's examining the code base, the blueprints, by modeling how data and control flow through the application. But the application itself is never turned on.
That sounds like a magic bullet, building security in from the very start.
In theory, it's fantastic. But in practice, there are challenges.
Such as?
The biggest challenge with SAST tools is that they can be very noisy.
Noisy.
They often generate a huge volume of warnings, and a large chunk of those can be false positives, which I know we'll get to later. Teams can get overwhelmed trying to sort through thousands of theoretical weaknesses.
So the value isn't just finding every single flaw, but more about forcing developers to think about security early.
Absolutely. It enforces secure coding standards. It helps shift security left. So we're fixing problems when they're cheap to fix during coding, not after the system is deployed.
Which is essential for modern rapid development.
It's mandatory for any CI/CD pipeline, yeah.
Speaking of shifting left, that takes us to the most proactive stage of all. Our sources really hammered this point home. At what stage is threat modeling most effective for finding those big architectural flaws?
It has to be during the design and architecture phase. No question.
Before a single line of code is written.
If you wait until coding starts, you're already behind. By the time you get to testing, you're just finding the holes in the flawed architecture you already built.
So what are the architects and developers actually doing during threat modeling? It sounds a little abstract.
It's anything but. They're mapping out the system, identifying assets, and looking for what we call trust boundaries.
A trust boundary.
That's any point where data or control flows from a less trusted area to a more trusted one, or vice versa.
And are there specific methods they use?
Yeah, many teams use a methodology like STRIDE. It's an acronym for spoofing, tampering, repudiation, and so on.
Okay.
Using STRIDE, you systematically brainstorm how an attacker could exploit each component. You explicitly ask, how could someone spoof their identity here? How could this data be tampered with in transit? It forces you to design proactive controls from the jump.
That structural thinking really is the key. Now let's talk about testing strategy itself. We hear vulnerability scan and penetration tests thrown around a lot. What's the fundamental difference?
The difference is all about intent and action. A vulnerability scan is automated. It's a high-volume check against a database of known signatures and weaknesses.
And it gives you a list.
It gives you a list of potential problems and then it stops. A penetration test, on the other hand, simulates a real-world attack.
With a human involved.
Yes, and that's crucial. It involves actively exploiting the vulnerabilities it finds to assess the real-world risk and impact. The goal is to prove definitively that a weakness can be used to steal data or take over a system.
That's a huge difference in value. The scan of the checklist, the pen test gives you actual business-level risk.
Right. When a pen tester shows that a weak login form led directly to them accessing the customer database, that gets attention immediately.
And that's something an automated scanner just can't do, right? The creative part.
It can't. Scanners are great for broad coverage, but they can't chain multiple low-severity issues together to create a high-impact attack. A creative human can.
This need for confirmation leads perfectly into reporting challenges. If we're running all these automated tools, we're going to get inaccurate results. What's the term for a test result that incorrectly flags a vulnerability that isn't really there?
That's a false positive.
Yeah.
And it is a major, major drain on security teams everywhere.
What's the real implication of that? I mean, beyond just being an incorrect flag.
The implication is massive. Every hour an engineer spends investigating a false alarm is an hour they are not spending fixing a real critical risk.
So if your tool has a 40% false positive rate,
You've essentially just cut your team's effectiveness by 40%. It changes the problem from just detection to prioritization. You're not just fighting attackers, you're fighting the noise from your own tools.
which emphasizes why validation is so critical before you rush to patch something.
It's absolutely critical. Tuning your tools, cross-referencing results, and having skilled humans validate the findings are the only ways to focus on what truly matters.
Okay, we've drilled down into the tools and strategies. Let's zoom back out to the high-level standards. We always come back to the foundational CIA triad: confidentiality, integrity, and availability. We've talked about confidentiality and integrity. What does the availability pillar primarily ensure?
Availability is the operational side of security. It ensures that your information, your systems, your applications, that they're all accessible and functional to authorized users when they need them.
So you could have perfect encryption and data integrity, but if the server is down, you failed on availability.
Precisely. Availability is about resilience. The biggest threats are things like hardware failures, sure, but also cyber attacks, like a distributed denial of service or DDoS attack.
Which just overwhelms the system.
Right, makes it totally inaccessible. But it's also about good old-fashioned capacity planning, making sure your system can handle the load.
It's often the forgotten pillar until something breaks. Finally, let's touch on the industry consensus for application risks. What is the role of the OWASP Top 10 document?
The OWASP Top 10 is published by the Open Web Application Security Project. It identifies the 10 most critical security risks facing web applications today.
And it's basically the community's consensus on what matters most.
It is. It's not a formal, enforceable standard, but it serves as a crucial awareness guide. If you're building a web app, you have to assume you'll be tested against it.
So failing to protect against something like an injection flaw is just a fundamental failure.
It is. It provides a common language for risk. It helps teams prioritize. If you have limited resources, you start with the issues on the top 10.
That makes sense. It drives the whole market for secure code training and tools.
Absolutely. It keeps everyone focused on the common vulnerabilities that actually lead to the biggest breaches.
Thanks for sharing your sources with us for this deep dive. We really hope this has given you a clear, fast track to understanding these security fundamentals in a deeper way.
Until next time.